I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with a guy I've known a few years, Justin Zeefe, who runs Nisos. Justin, nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
How's everything?
Very well, you?
Doing pretty good. The security business is a busy time, right?
It is.
I know you know that. Yeah. Tell us about the company, about Nisos.
Sure. So Nisos was formed in 2015 with a central thesis that there was nobody out there in the private sector providing the same level of diligence, rigor, acumen, and experience that was being applied inside the government to the government's most difficult problems and to the nation states that are sponsoring those problems.
Yeah.
So the idea was, what if we took this this set of skills, these very valuable and experienced operators who are applying their trade for the government, and turn them loose in the commercial sector where 85% of U.S. critical infrastructure is actually owned.
Yeah. Why do you suppose government has gotten pretty good at this? Is it just the threat is more intense in a government setting? Because there are a lot of people who have great skills who learn in government. What's kind of the secret there? Is it just the threat is intense there?
I think there's a couple of factors. Number one, the threat is indeed more intense. The stakes are much higher.
They are.
If proprietary information belonging to the national security of the United States or any other country is compromised, that's inherently more valuable than trade secrets in the eyes of the government. But I think the second and perhaps more important factor is that within the government walls, with the sanction of the government under whatever title might be appropriate, these folks who would be criminals anywhere else are able to apply their trade and do whatever they want with government's approval.
Yeah, because there's really no international norms or treaties or anything like that that govern. In fact, there's probably some countries where hacking the United States is perfectly legal.
I would say
that's right.
More countries than not, tacitly if not explicitly, permit the folks in the private sector to attack United States and other democratic institutions, provided that they don't turn their skill sets against their comrades.
Interesting. And I know you have some legal background, so I guess you're a good guy to ask, but how do you solve that problem, or do you?
Whether there's a prescriptive solution that addresses the entire problem writ large, I doubt it. I think it's iterative, probably going to be cat and mouse for quite some time. It's fine to try and prescribe solutions. Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of '94 and '95, I believe, was considered to be at the time, prescriptive, and we look backwards now, and it was very short-sighted, and didn't survive, half a decade before it was effectively obsolete. So I don't know that there's a prescriptive methodology. The attackers tend to follow the path of least resistance, like water and electricity. And so anybody who leaves their back door open, that's the way they're going to go through. If the back door's closed, they'll go through the window. So coming up with a comprehensive strategy to address those problems, that's better left to the politicians. We're practitioners. We're much more interested in helping our clients actually secure their proprietary information, their data, their core infrastructure, and anything that could amount to an existential event for them should their data be compromised.
When a client calls you, they probably have no idea what happened or why or what, right? They're calling you because they've got an issue and they need help.
It depends, of course.
Or they're trying to prevent.
Right. So there's really bucketing into two categories. There's the proactive clients who are interested, who understand the threat surface at some level, or who have said, "Hey, our board is now aware that cyber is the number one cause of damage to a company, either in terms of reputation or financial position."
Do they say that?
They do. Yeah. I mean, we haven't, to my knowledge, there hasn't been a derivative lawsuit yet against the leadership of a company for having failed to put cybersecurity measures in place that were not there. But we're not probably very far away from that. And so board members are now keenly aware that they have a duty to protect the company.
Yeah.
And then on the reactive side of the house, to your original question, quite often it's, we have no idea what happened, please help us wrap our hands and head around this problem and stop the bleeding.
Mm-hmm. I know you've told me a couple of times that you guys are growing like crazy. Either of those growing faster than the other, the preventive versus response? Like people talk about, that whole shift left, shift right thing. Like where shift left means you're trying to stop things, shift right, you're kind of going, I can't stop anything, just respond. You're going to get attacked, so just deal with it, just respond. What are you guys seeing? Is it in equal measures with your
I wouldn't
clients?
say it's equal. I'd say it's probably 70-30. to the proactive. And,
That's good.
Yeah.
You know something? A lot of people tell me the opposite. Maybe just different firms get
or
called
maybe
for
I'm
different-
wrong.
Well,
But-
it's what you're seeing. I mean,
It is
if
what
people
I'm
are
seeing,
calling
yeah.
you for that, then that's good. But you know, a lot of people in our industry, and I don't know that I approve, have this more pessimistic view that you're not going to stop anything, just build up your IR. But you
Yeah.
guys see a little bit maybe the other way.
In our experience to date, the organizations that are most of the belief that whatever's going to happen is going to happen and you can only do so much tend to be overly reliant on products and on the traditional sales pipeline for security services that they've been relying on since the days that Pinkerton was riding a stagecoach around.
Yeah.
And times have changed. The methodology by which adversaries attempt to gain and maintain access to your environment and remove data from that environment have rapidly accelerated. And what I feel that a lot of people don't understand or appreciate is that it is an entire economy now. The number of people who are making money from committing cybercrime is increasing dramatically month over month, quarter over quarter, and they're making a pretty sizable profit. And like any business, it's attracted the interest of organized crime as well as legitimate business people in some of the more unsavory parts of the world. And they've said, all right, well, as with any business that we invest in, we expect you to grow. We expect you to do research and development, figure out how to improve your techniques, professionalize, standardize, and make more money. And so what I don't think is really accounted for in the way that it ought to be is the increase in professionalization and accuracy of the threat actors. Even though organizations are putting more money into their cybersecurity budget, which is, some folks say should be around 10% of your spend.
I wish it was. It seems like it's rarely that high.
It's rarely that.
Yeah.
It tends to be much higher in
5 is a typical number, I see.
in the industries where regulation has been put into place more stringently than in others, i.e. the financial industry, the spend is a little bit higher.
A little higher.
But for organizations that don't really appreciate the value of their IP until they see it floating around the internet, their spend is a bit lower.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, now, in terms of that threat, question, do you see in your work an increase in the amount of automation that kind of sits behind some of the problems that your customers are dealing with, where it's less? I know when I started thinking about hacking, I always had this image of these people, hackers, sitting there, don't like you and I, let's go deface their site. They're like somebody with fingers to keyboard. My sense has been, tell me if this is right, is that a lot of the cybersecurity activity on the offense starts with a piece of automation that goes and uses intelligence to do things. And that seems like a different game than trying to figure out what hacker is coming after me. Am I reading that right?
You
hear
are,
that
and
from
it's a
clients?
natural iteration of, as I said earlier, an organization that seeks to increase its margins and professionalize and grow. So what they've done, rather than having one or two hackers, sitting in front of a couple computers outside of, Belarus or, Kiev or wherever, they are using automated services to identify potential targets as a first level, and then the next level is they use their human capabilities to outmaneuver whatever products have already been placed in the environment that the board felt were sufficient to protect the environment.
Do you get much time with boards and with senior executives?
We do.
What are you seeing and what are you hearing from them? They getting more intelligent, staying the same, or getting?
The questions are getting.
Are they getting dumber?
The questions I've heard quite a few times. People give the advice that you should speak to the board as though you're speaking to children.
I hate that advice.
And I think that's terrible advice. I would rather speak to
advice.
people as though they are, reasoning human beings who understand the responsibility that they have and the domain that they're responsible for protecting. And I think that's both been received as refreshing as well as informative. We have seen a number of occasions where board members or senior leaders at the C-suite said, that had not been explained to us in that fashion. We did not understand that we should view these attackers as competitors, not necessarily as criminals. These are organizations that, when you as a Fortune 1000 company have a good interaction with a salesperson who's selling a product and you agree to spend $2 million on whatever that product is, endpoint detection, EDR, something for your SIM or your SOC or whatever, It's important to understand that there are shell companies in Western Europe or elsewhere that are buying the same license, they're buying the same product, and they're reverse engineering in the comfort of their homes or their offices to figure out how to route themselves around that protective solution, thus rendering it effectively, invalid.
Yeah.
So, to your earlier point, yes, it has become automated in a large fashion, but it's still very much driven by people who are utilizing processes to make what they're doing more efficient. But at the end of the day, if a target is on their radar and they're interested in gaining access to that environment, there's going to be a lot of dedication put behind that in terms of man hours to get in.
Any predictions that you have for the coming few years, either on the offense, defense, or even just in terms of technology and business?
I think we're going to see a number of catastrophic, if not existential, attacks. That will be a turning point in terms of.
That's a cheery thought.
I mean, I consider myself a pragmatist at some level.
No, I agree
If we were being paid by the bad guys, that's what I would advise is to consider those courses of action, because it's still very much a green space for the attackers, and they're not encountering a lot of resistance.
You think critical infrastructure targets, power?
So yes, but again, it's also from a nation-state sponsored or sanctioned perspective. Yes, critical infrastructure is probably the number one target on their minds. But for the purposes of the commercial sector, there's very little to be gained in terms of profit from attacking a critical infrastructure node like a dam. Yes, you could do ransomware.
You make a point, though.
Sure, you can make a point, but you're more interested in making a profit.
Yeah, that's true.
More often than not. So your better bet is to go after a hedge fund, which will have an incredible amount of proprietary information and very little in the way of security, or an organization that has a whole bunch of patents that are getting ready to be filed. A law firm.
Yeah.
That information is very valuable to a Chinese manufacturer or to a Chinese research organization that does not care about the provenance of the information that it's utilizing.
The thing I always grew up learning in cyber, that when you do a risk assessment of anything, like one of your clients or something, you look to see what controls are in place to stop a thing from happening. And if the controls are functional and they're effective and there's procedures around a good policy, you say, hey, thumbs up, you got a good scheme. Regardless of what the intent is, you've got a good set of controls. But what I find way too often is that the controls are not present, and the justification for not worrying is, why would anybody do that to me? And that's why I always bring up automation, because I think in many cases the automation doesn't care. The automation finds a piece of infrastructure, embeds itself in that infrastructure, and then either uses, degrades, steals, something, and may not even realize that it's sitting on a PLC in a nuclear power plant. What does it know? It's just an open port. So I think that concept that, well, who's going to do it? You probably hear that once in a while from a client. They're not coming after us. I don't buy that. I think we're at a point now where if the controls are not there, if I can demonstrate that I can do something to you, then that's, in 2019 and beyond, that's got to be considered unacceptable. Does that make sense?
It does, and I agree. And one of our core services is under the rubric of active defense is a compromise assessment, and that is an effort to determine whether a sophisticated adversary has already gained access to your environment, whether they're maintaining that access, and whether they're doing anything with it. And it's not uncommon for us to find something in the environment that doesn't belong there. Very often it is due to the organization failing to understand completely everything that's connected to the network. So you may have a network map put together by somebody who ran a scan on the environment, and they say, okay, we've got these 50 machines, but you're not seeing the 51st machine, which is an 8086 that hasn't been rebooted since the Reagan administration, and it's running code that was programmed by somebody who's been dead for 15 years. And so nobody knew how to update it, much less how to illuminate it on the network. And those are your really critical points of entry, and they're not hard to find.
You ever done one where you went and looked and everything was perfect and you said A+, nothing we can tell you?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
It would seem like it's pretty unlikely, right? This is a tough business, isn't it?
It is, but I think it's also important to understand, in our opinion, The product market is exceptionally bloated. This is in large part driven
It is.
by the venture world, which sees an incredible return on their investment over a very short period of time, and then they don't really care what happens with the viability of that product in years 3 through 6. So there's an over-reliance on products in the marketplace.
You've just described the TAG cyber value prop, right? We help people figure that out, right?
I'm happy to do
by
that for
inviting people like you to explain the situation. So, well, listen, I'm so happy you came by to visit us here in New York.
Pleasure to be here.
You're up here a lot.
We're up here a lot.
You guys have clients all over the place.
We do. We're in Silicon Valley more often than not, but our clients are all over the country.
I don't want this to sound condescending, but I'm proud of you guys. I met you way back when you were starting.
You did.
And you've built up your business nicely, and I'm very happy you're doing it.
Thank you. It's been a lot of hard work, mostly done by the operators that we have on our team. We've been exceptionally fortunate to attract really the best in the business.
Keep doing it. It's important. It helps make us all safer.
Happy to do it.
Come back and visit us soon.
Count on it.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
And we'll see you next time.